The gunshot that shattered the whiskey bottle behind the bar was meant for her heart, but fate had other plans that sweltering August evening in 1878. Clara Bennett ducked behind the wooden counter of the Silver Dollar Saloon in Dodge City, Kansas, her hands trembling as shards of glass rained down around her like deadly confetti. The drunk cowpoke who had pulled the trigger was already being wrestled to the ground by two other patrons, but the damage was done. Her boss, Vernon Pike, would add the cost of that bottle to the mountain of debt she already owed him, and there was nothing she could do about it. She pressed her back against the liquor cabinet, willing her racing heart to slow. Her dress, a garish red satin thing that Vernon insisted she wear, was dampened with sweat in the oppressive heat. The saloon stank of tobacco, spilled beer, and unwashed bodies. Through the swinging doors, she could see the sun setting over the dusty main street, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that seemed impossibly beautiful compared to the ugliness of her current life. Clara was 22 years old, and she had been working at the Silver Dollar for nearly 8 months now, ever since the winter fever had taken their parents and left her responsible for her 15-year-old sister, Lily. The thought of Lily waiting in their cramped room above the general store was the only thing that kept Clara moving. She pushed herself up from the floor, brushing glass from her skirt, and returned to serving drinks with a forced smile plastered on her face. The men at the tables barely noticed her distress. To them, she was just another saloon girl, interchangeable with any other woman desperate enough to work in such an establishment. She carried a tray of whiskey glasses to a corner table where 3 ranch hands were playing cards, setting the drinks down without meeting their eyes. "Thank you, darling," one of them said, his hand sliding up her arm in a way that made her skin crawl. She pulled away as politely as she could manage and hurried back to the bar. Vernon was there, his jowly face red with anger, a piece of paper in his meaty hand. "That bottle was imported from Kentucky," he snarled, jabbing the paper toward her. $20, added to your account." Clara felt the blood drain from her face. $20. She made $12 a week, and most of that went to rent, food, and the medicine Lily needed for her weak lungs. Vernon kept a careful ledger of everything his employees owed him, from their initial signing bonuses to broken dishes to the percentage he claimed from their tips. Clara had started working here with a debt of $50, money Vernon had given her to pay for her parents' burial. Now, 8 months later, she owed him nearly $300. The number grew faster than she could possibly pay it down, and Vernon knew it. He liked his girls indebted. It kept them working, kept them desperate, kept them from leaving. "Mr. Pike, please," Clara whispered, her voice barely audible over the piano music and raucous laughter filling the saloon. "I cannot afford another charge. I have been working every night. I have not missed a single shift." "Should have been more careful," Vernon said, tucking the paper into his vest pocket. "Now, get back to work. Table 7 needs attending." Clara turned away, blinking back tears. She would not cry. Not here, not in front of these men. She had learned early on that showing weakness only invited more trouble. She made her way to table 7, where a lone figure sat with his back to the wall. He was different from the usual clientele, she noticed immediately. His clothes, while dusty from travel, were well made. His hat sat on the table beside a half-empty glass of whiskey, revealing dark hair touched with just a hint of gray at the temples. He looked to be in his late 20s, with a strong jaw shadowed with stubble and eyes the color of storm clouds. Those eyes were watching her approach with an intensity that made her hesitate. "What can I get you, sir?" Clara asked, proud that her voice remained steady. "Another whiskey," he said, his voice low and measured. "And information, if you are willing to provide it." Clara glanced over her shoulder, checking to see if Vernon was watching. He was busy berating another girl near the bar. "What kind of information?" "The kind about why Vernon Pike has a reputation for keeping his employees trapped in debt they can never repay." The cowboy leaned back in his chair, his gaze never leaving her face. "And why a woman like you is working in a place like this." Heat flooded Clara's cheeks. "You know nothing about me or my circumstances." "I know you are not like the others here," he said quietly. "I know you are scared, and I know Vernon Pike is a snake who preys on desperate people." He paused, then added, "My name is James Thornton. I own a cattle ranch about 50 miles northwest of here, near the town of Garden City. I came to Dodge to sell my herd and heard talk of the Silver Dollar and its owner's unsavory business practices." Clara's heart hammered in her chest. She should walk away. Talking to customers like this, having actual conversations instead of just flirting and serving drinks, was against Vernon's rules. But something about James Thornton made her want to trust him, want to believe that perhaps not every man who walked through those swinging doors was looking to take advantage. "I will get your whiskey," she said finally, turning away. She felt his eyes on her as she walked back to the bar. Her mind was spinning. Why would a rancher care about Vernon's business practices? What did he want from her? Men always wanted something. She poured the whiskey with shaking hands, then carried it back to his table. $300, she heard herself say as she set the glass down. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "That is what I owe Mr. Pike. I came here to get money for my sister's care after our parents died. He gave me $50 up front for their burial and told me I could work off the debt. But he charges for everything. Broken glasses, torn dresses, days we are sick. The debt only grows." James Thornton's jaw tightened. "And your sister, where is she?" "In our room. She is 15 and she has weak lungs. The doctor says she needs clean air and good food to get stronger, but I can barely afford to keep us fed." Clara glanced over her shoulder again. Vernon was looking their way now, his piggy eyes narrowed with suspicion. "I must go. I have said too much already." "Wait." James reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather wallet. He counted out several bills and laid them on the table. "For your time." Clara stared at the money. $20. Enough to cover the broken bottle and still have something left over. "I cannot accept this." "You already have," James said, standing up. He was tall, she realized, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the lean, muscular build of a man who spent his days working hard physical labor. "I will be staying at the hotel across the street, room 12. If you change your mind about wanting help, come find me." He picked up his hat, placed it on his head, and walked out of the saloon without looking back. Clara snatched up the money and quickly tucked it into her bodice before any of the other patrons could see. Her mind was reeling. Was this some kind of trick? Men did not just offer help without expecting something in return. But James Thornton had not tried to touch her, had not made any improper suggestions. He had simply offered information and money and then left. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Clara served drinks, dodged grabbing hands, and smiled until her face ached. When the saloon finally closed at 2 a.m, she helped the other girls clean up, then collected her meager wages from Vernon. He eyed her suspiciously as he counted out the bills. "That cowboy at table 7 seemed mighty interested in you," Vernon said, his breath reeking of cigars. "He give you any trouble?" "No, sir," Clara said quickly. "He was a perfect gentleman." Vernon grunted. "Gentlemen do not come to saloons. Remember that. And remember who owns you until that debt is paid." Clara hurried out into the night, grateful to escape his presence. The August air was still warm, but it felt clean compared to the stale atmosphere of the saloon. She walked quickly through the darkened streets toward the general store, her hand on the small knife she kept hidden in her pocket. Dodge City was dangerous after dark, full of drunks and desperados, but she had learned to be careful, to stay in the shadows and move quickly. The room she shared with Lily was accessed by a narrow staircase on the side of the general store. Clara climbed the creaking steps and let herself in quietly, not wanting to wake her sister if she was sleeping. But Lily was awake, sitting up in the narrow bed they shared, a book open on her lap. She looked up when Clara entered, her face breaking into a smile. "You are home early," Lily said, closing the book. She was a pretty girl, with the same chestnut hair as Clara, but lighter eyes, more green than brown. She was too thin, though, her nightgown hanging loose on her frame, and there were dark circles under her eyes. "Not so early," Clara said, sitting down on the edge of the bed and unlacing her boots. "It is past 2. You should be sleeping." "I cannot sleep when I worry about you in that place," Lily said softly. "Did something happen tonight? You look troubled." Clara hesitated, then told her sister about the broken bottle, the added debt, and the mysterious rancher named James Thornton. As she spoke, she pulled the $20 from her bodice and held it out for Lily to see. "He just gave you this?" Lily asked, her eyes wide. "Without asking for anything?" "He said if I wanted help, I should come to his hotel room," Clara said. "But I do not know if I should trust him. Why would a stranger offer to help us?" "Perhaps he is a good man," Lily suggested. "Not all men are like Mr. Pike." "I know that," Clara said, tucking the money into their small tin cash box, which she kept hidden under a loose floorboard. But good men usually have wives and families. They do not offer to help strange women out of the kindness of their hearts. You should at least talk to him, Lily said, coughing into her hand. The cough was getting worse, Clara noted with concern. They needed to get out of this dusty, cramped room and into some place with fresh air. What do you have to lose? Everything, Clara thought, but she did not say it aloud. Instead, she changed into her nightgown and lay down beside her sister, staring up at the ceiling. Sleep was a long time coming, and when it finally did, she dreamed of wide-open spaces and a man with storm-gray eyes. The next morning, Clara woke early despite her late night. Lily was still sleeping, her breathing raspy but steady. Clara dressed in her day clothes, a simple brown skirt and white blouse that were faded from many washings, but at least respectable. She counted the money in their cash box. With the $20 from James Thornton, they had $37 total. Not nearly enough to pay off her debt to Vernon, but enough to buy some good food and maybe a new bottle of the tonic the doctor had recommended for Lily's lungs. She left Lily sleeping and went downstairs to buy provisions from the general store. Mrs. Henderson, the store owner's wife, greeted her with a kind smile. She was one of the few people in town who did not treat Clara with disdain for working at the saloon. "How is your sister, dear?" Mrs. Henderson asked as she wrapped up a loaf of fresh bread and a small wedge of cheese. "Her cough is worse," Clara admitted. "I am worried about her." "That room you are renting is not good for weak lungs," Mrs. Henderson said gently. "Too much dust from the street. She needs clean country air." "I know," Clara said, handing over the money for her purchases. "I am working on a solution." As she left the store, her eyes drifted across the street to the hotel. Room 12, James Thornton had said. She could see the building from here, its whitewashed walls bright in the morning sun. Before she could second-guess herself, Clara found her feet carrying her across the dusty street and through the hotel's front door. The clerk at the desk looked her up and down with barely concealed contempt. He recognized her from the saloon, no doubt. Clara lifted her chin and spoke clearly. "I am here to see James Thornton, room 12. "I will let him know you are here," the clerk said coldly, disappearing up the stairs. Clara waited in the lobby, her hands clutching her small bundle of provisions, acutely aware of how out of place she looked. The hotel was one of Dodge City's nicer establishments, with clean floors and decent furniture. It was the kind of place respectable people stayed, not saloon girls with mounting debts and desperate circumstances. A few minutes later, James Thornton appeared at the top of the stairs. He had shaved and changed into clean clothes, and in the bright morning light, Clara could see him more clearly than she had in the dim saloon. He was handsome in a rugged way, with strong features and those penetrating gray eyes that seemed to see right through her defenses. He came down the stairs quickly, his face breaking into a smile when he saw her. "Miss Bennett," he said, his voice warm. "I hoped you would come." "How did you know my name?" Clara asked, suspicion flaring. "I asked around," James admitted. "I wanted to know more about your situation before I made my offer." "What offer?" Clara's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Let us talk somewhere more private," James said, gesturing toward the dining room off the lobby. "Have you had breakfast?" Clara shook her head. James guided her into the dining room, which was empty at this early hour. He pulled out a chair for her at a corner table, then signaled the waiter. "2 orders of eggs, bacon, and biscuits. Coffee for both of us." "I cannot afford to pay for breakfast here," Clara protested. "You are my guest," James said firmly. He waited until the waiter had left, then leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "Miss Bennett, I am going to be direct with you because I think you appreciate honesty. I need a wife." Clara felt as though all the air had been sucked from the room. "Excuse me?" "I own a successful cattle ranch," James continued, his words measured and calm. "I have built it from nothing over the past 6 years, and it is finally turning a good profit. But it is a lonely life, and I am tired of living it alone. I came to Dodge City intending to find a wife, someone who understands hard work and is not afraid of ranch life." "There are mail-order bride services for that," Clara said, her voice faint. "I am aware," James said. "But I prefer to choose my own bride, someone I have actually met and spoken to. When I heard about Vernon Pike's practices and learned that he had several women trapped in his debt, I thought perhaps I could help one of them, while also helping myself." The waiter arrived with their food, and Clara was grateful for the interruption. Her mind was spinning. This was insane. She had only met this man last night, spoken to him for maybe 5 minutes total, and now he was proposing marriage. "I know this is sudden," James said once the waiter had left again. He pushed a plate of food toward her. "Please eat while we talk. You look like you have not had a proper meal in some time." Clara's stomach growled, betraying her. The eggs and bacon smelled heavenly, and the biscuits were still steaming. She picked up her fork and took a tentative bite. The food was delicious, better than anything she had eaten in months. As she ate, James continued talking. "I am not proposing a love match," he said quietly. "I understand that we do not know each other. What I am proposing is a practical arrangement. I will pay off your debt to Vernon Pike in full. In exchange, you and your sister will come to my ranch. You will become my wife, and Lily will live with us as part of our family. The ranch is in good country, with clean air that should help her lungs. She will have her own room, good food, and access to a doctor in Garden City." "And what would you expect from me as your wife?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She needed to know what he would demand of her, what price she would be paying for her and Lily's freedom. James met her eyes steadily. "I would expect you to help run the household, to be a partner in managing the ranch. I have 2 ranch hands who live in the bunkhouse, and we sometimes hire additional help during busy seasons. Someone needs to manage the cooking and household accounts. As for the other aspects of marriage, I will not force myself on you. When and if you are ready for that side of things, it will be your choice." Clara set down her fork, her hands trembling. "Why would you do this? You could have any woman. Why choose someone like me?" "Because I admire your strength," James said simply. "You are working in a terrible situation to care for your sister. That shows character. And because I think we could have a good partnership, built on mutual respect, if not immediate affection. Those feelings can grow over time, or so I have been told." "I need to think about this," Clara said, "and I need to talk to Lily." "Of course," James agreed. "But I should tell you that I plan to leave Dodge City the day after tomorrow. I have business to conclude here, but then I must return to the ranch. If you're going to accept my offer, I need to know by tomorrow evening so I can settle things with Vernon Pike and make arrangements for your travel." Clara finished her breakfast in silence, her mind churning through the implications of what James was proposing. It was completely insane. People did not get married after knowing each other for less than a day. But then again, mail-order brides married men they had never met at all. At least she had spoken to James, had seen that he treated her with respect and kindness. And, more importantly, this could be Lily's salvation. Her sister needed clean air and good food, things Clara could never provide while trapped in debt to Vernon Pike. "I will give you my answer tomorrow," Clara said finally. "Where should I meet you?" "Here at the hotel," James said. "At 6 in the evening. That will give me time to conclude my business with Pike if you say yes." Clara nodded and stood up. James rose as well, his manners impeccable. "Thank you for the breakfast, Mr. Thornton." "James," he corrected gently. "If we are to be married, you should call me James." "If," Clara emphasized, but she felt a small smile tugging at her lips despite her nervousness. "I have not said yes yet." She left the hotel in a daze and made her way back to the room above the general store. Lily was awake now, sitting at their small table by the window, looking out at the street below. She turned when Clara entered, her face lighting up. "You were gone a long time," Lily said. "I was beginning to worry." Clara set down her bundle and then sat down across from her sister. "I need to tell you something extraordinary, and I need you to listen carefully before you react." She told Lily everything about James Thornton's proposal, his offer to pay off her debt, his promise to take them both to his ranch where Lily could have clean air and proper care. As she spoke, she watched her sister's expression change from shock to hope to cautious optimism. "This could be the answer to our prayers," Lily said when Clara finished. "A chance for both of us to have a real life." "But we do not know him," Clara protested. "What if he is cruel? What if he mistreats us?" "What if he does not?" Lily countered. "Clara, look at where we are. You are working yourself to death in that saloon, and the debt only grows. In another few months you will owe Vernon Pike so much money that you will never be free, and I am getting sicker. We both know it, even if we do not say it aloud. This room, this town, this life is killing us both slowly." Clara reached across the table and took her sister's thin hands in hers. "Are you sure? Because if I do this, there is no going back. I will be his wife, bound to him legally and in the eyes of God." "I am sure," Lily said firmly. "I think you should say yes. And Clara, I saw the way your face changed when you talked about him. I think perhaps you are a little bit interested in him, even if you will not admit it." Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. "That is ridiculous. I have spoken to the man for barely an hour total." "Sometimes that is all it takes," Lily said with a wisdom beyond her years. "Mama always said she knew she loved Papa the first time she saw him." "That is different," Clara said, but her protest was weak. The truth was, there had been something about James Thornton that had drawn her from the moment she approached his table. A sense of safety, perhaps, or simply the way he had looked at her like she was a person worthy of respect, not just a saloon girl to be used and discarded. They spent the rest of the day discussing the decision, weighing the risks against the potential rewards. Clara had to work at the saloon that evening, enduring another night of serving drinks and avoiding Vernon's suspicious glares. He cornered her near the end of the night, his breath hot on her face as he leaned in close. "I heard you were seen going into the hotel this morning," Vernon said, his meaty fingers digging into her arm. "The hotel where that rancher is staying. You've been seeing him behind my back?" "I went to thank him for his generous tip," Clara said, yanking her arm free. "There is no rule against that." "You forget that you belong to me until that debt is paid," Vernon growled. "I invested money in you, and I expect a return on that investment. You go running off with some cowboy, and I will find you. I will make sure everyone knows what you are. No respectable man will want you then." Clara felt ice run through her veins, but she forced herself to meet Vernon's eyes. "I am not going anywhere, Mr. Pike. I will be here tomorrow night, as usual." It was not technically a lie. She would be there tomorrow night, unless James Thornton paid off her debt first. And if Vernon tried to stop her from leaving after that, well, she would deal with that problem when it came to it. The next day passed in a blur of nervous anticipation. Clara barely slept, and when she did, she had strange dreams of wide prairies and a house she had never seen. She spent the morning with Lily, helping her pack their few belongings into the 2 small carpet bags that held everything they owned. If she was going to say yes to James's proposal, she wanted to be ready to leave immediately. The longer they stayed in Dodge City, the more opportunity Vernon would have to cause trouble. At 5:30, Clara dressed in her best dress, a dark blue cotton that had belonged to her mother. She brushed her hair until it shone and pinned it up in a simple style. She wanted to look respectable, like a woman worthy of being a rancher's wife. "You look beautiful," Lily said, smiling at her from the bed. The excitement had brought color to her sister's pale cheeks. "He is going to be so glad you said yes." "I have not said yes yet," Clara reminded her, but they both knew she was going to. There was no other choice, not really. This was their chance at a new life, and they had to take it. Clara arrived at the hotel at precisely 6 o'clock. James was waiting for her in the lobby, looking nervous for the first time since she had met him. He stood when he saw her, his hat in his hands. "Miss Bennett," he said formally, "thank you for coming." "Clara," she said softly, "if we are to be married, you should call me Clara." His face broke into a wide smile, and Clara realized it was the first time she had seen him truly smile. It transformed his whole face, making him look younger and less guarded. "Does that mean you are saying yes?" "Yes," Clara said, and the words seemed to echo in the small lobby. "I will marry you, James Thornton. I will become your wife and help you run your ranch, and you will take care of my sister and me. Those are the terms." "Those are the terms," James agreed. He offered her his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, Clara took it. Together, they walked up the main street of Dodge City to Vernon Pike's saloon. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and red. In an hour, Clara would normally be starting her shift, putting on her red satin dress and pasting on a false smile. Instead, she was walking into the Silver Dollar as a customer with a man who had promised to buy her freedom. Vernon was behind the bar when they entered, his eyes narrowing when he saw Clara on James's arm. "What is this?" he demanded. "Mr. Pike," James said, his voice polite but firm, "I have come to settle Miss Bennett's debt to you." "Her debt is $300, Vernon said, his face turning red, "plus interest." "I was under the impression the debt was exactly $287, James said calmly. That is what you told her 2 nights ago, before the broken bottle incident. There have been additional expenses, Vernon blustered. Her uniform needs replacing. There are house fees, $350, and that is my final offer. Your final offer? James's voice took on a dangerous edge. You are not in a position to make offers, Pike. I am prepared to pay the debt that Miss Bennett actually owes you, which is $287. I will not pay a penny more for your fictional fees and interest. Vernon's hand moved towards something under the bar, probably a gun, but James was faster. He pulled back his coat, revealing a revolver holstered at his hip. He did not draw it, but the message was clear. Clara felt her heart hammering in her chest. This could go very wrong, very quickly. Let me make myself clear, James said, his voice low and steady. Clara Bennett is leaving your employ today. I am willing to pay her legitimate debt to you in full. You can accept that payment and let her go peacefully, or you can refuse, and I will take this matter to the town marshal. I am quite certain he would be interested to hear about your practice of trapping women in ever-growing debts they can never repay. I believe there are laws against that sort of thing. The saloon had gone quiet. The few early customers were watching the confrontation with interest. Vernon looked around, seeing that he had an audience, and Clara could practically see him calculating whether it was worth fighting over this. Finally, he spat on the floor and shoved a ledger across the bar. $287, he growled. Cash, right now. James counted out the money slowly, making sure Vernon saw every bill. When he was done, he pushed the money across the bar. I want a receipt showing that Clara Bennett's debt has been paid in full. Vernon scrawled something on a piece of paper and thrust it at Clara. She took it with shaking hands, staring at the words that meant her freedom. Paid in full, it said, dated and signed by Vernon Pike. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Thank you for your time, Mr. Pike, James said coolly. He offered Clara his arm again. Shall we go, Clara? They walked out of the Silver Dollar together, and Clara felt as though she was floating. The chains that had bound her for 8 long months were finally broken. She was free. They were going to be okay. Thank you, she whispered as they stepped out into the twilight. I do not know how to thank you properly. You already have, James said, covering her hand with his where it rested on his arm. You agreed to be my wife. That is thanks enough. They returned to the general store, where Lily was waiting anxiously. When Clara showed her the receipt, Lily burst into tears of joy and threw her arms around her sister. We are really leaving? Lily asked through her tears. This is really happening? It is really happening, Clara confirmed. She looked at James. When do we leave? Tomorrow morning at first light, James said. I have a wagon and team ready. It will take us 2 days to reach the ranch. Can you be ready by then? We are already packed, Clara said, gesturing to their 2 small carpet bags sitting by the door. James looked at the bags, then at the sparse room that had been their home. Clara saw something like sadness cross his face. This is all you have? This is all we need, Clara said, lifting her chin. She would not be ashamed of their poverty. They had survived, and that was what mattered. Then let us make sure you have more in your new life, James said gently. He pulled out his wallet again. Lily, I want you to go to the general store downstairs and pick out some new clothes for the journey. Clara, you too. Get whatever you need. We will be traveling hard for 2 days, and you should be comfortable. Lily looked at Clara for permission, and Clara nodded. Her sister scrambled down the stairs, her coughing forgotten in her excitement. Clara started to follow, but James caught her hand. Clara, I want you to know that I mean to keep my promise, he said quietly. You and Lily will be safe with me. I will take care of you both, and I will never hurt you or force you to do anything you are not comfortable with. This marriage, it will be whatever we make of it together. Clara looked up at him, studying his face in the fading light. He meant it, she realized. This was not some elaborate trick or trap. James Thornton was exactly what he appeared to be, a lonely rancher looking for a partner and willing to help 2 desperate women in the process. It was the kind of decency Clara had almost forgotten existed in the world. I believe you, she said softly. And James, I want you to know that I will do my best to be a good wife to you. I may not know much about ranching, but I am a hard worker, and I learn quickly. That is all I can ask, James said, smiling. Now go pick out some new clothes. I want to see you in something that was not chosen by Vernon Pike. Clara joined Lily downstairs in the general store, where her sister was already examining a rack of ready-made dresses. Mrs. Henderson was helping her, her face beaming with approval. "I am so happy for you girls," Mrs. Henderson said warmly. "That Mr. Thornton seems like a good man. Nothing like the usual riffraff that comes through Dodge." Clara selected 2 practical dresses, a skirt and shirtwaist, a warm coat for the prairie nights, and new boots that actually fit properly. Lily chose similar items, plus a warm shawl and a new bonnet. When they brought their selections to the counter, Mrs. Henderson wrapped everything carefully and presented the bill to James, who paid without complaint. "You will need provisions for the journey," Mrs. Henderson said. "Let me put together some supplies for you." She assembled a basket of food, including bread, cheese, dried meat, and fruit. She added a jar of her special honey, pressing it into Clara's hands with a warm smile. "For your new home," she said, "may it be filled with sweetness." That night, Clara and Lily slept in a room at the hotel, courtesy of James. It was the first time either of them had slept in a real hotel, in a bed with clean sheets and soft pillows. Lily fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted by the excitement and emotion of the day. But Clara lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling and thinking about what tomorrow would bring. She was getting married, to a man she barely knew. It should have terrified her, but instead, she felt a strange sense of peace. James Thornton had been nothing but kind and respectful to her. He had paid off her debt without asking for anything inappropriate in return. He had made sure Lily would be cared for. These were not the actions of a cruel man or a deceiver. These were the actions of someone who valued decency and fairness. And if Clara was being completely honest with herself, she was attracted to James. There was something about his quiet strength, his calm confidence, that made her feel safe. When he looked at her, she did not feel like a saloon girl or a piece of property. She felt like a woman worth respecting and protecting. It had been so long since anyone had made her feel that way. Perhaps Lily had been right. Perhaps sometimes you just knew when you met the right person. Clara was not ready to call it love, not yet. But there was definitely something there, a spark of possibility that made her heart beat faster when she thought about the future. She finally fell asleep with a smile on her face, dreaming of wide-open prairies and a pair of storm-gray eyes. The next morning, Clara and Lily woke before dawn. They dressed in their new traveling clothes, which fit properly, and were blessedly free of stains and tears. When they came downstairs, James was waiting with the wagon, already loaded with supplies. He helped them up onto the bench seat, then climbed up beside Clara and took the reins. As the sun rose over Dodge City, painting the buildings in shades of pink and gold, they drove out of town. Clara looked back once at the Silver Dollar Saloon, its windows dark and empty in the early morning light. She had been so miserable there, so trapped and hopeless. But that part of her life was over now. Whatever lay ahead, it had to be better than what she was leaving behind. The journey to Garden City took them across the Kansas prairie, through landscapes that seemed to stretch on forever. The grass was golden in the late summer sun, dotted with wildflowers and the occasional stand of cottonwood trees. James proved to be a good traveling companion, pointing out landmarks and telling stories about the country they were passing through. Lily, sitting between them on the bench, drank it all in with wide eyes. "I have never been outside of Dodge City," she admitted. "I did not know the world was so big." "It is bigger than you can imagine," James said with a smile. "Wait until you see the ranch. On a clear day, you can see for 20 miles in every direction." They stopped for lunch by a creek, and James showed them how to brew coffee over a campfire. Clara found herself watching him as he worked, noticing the efficiency of his movements, the way his hands were both strong and gentle. When he caught her looking, he smiled, and Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Tell me about the ranch," she said, partly to cover her embarrassment. "How did you come to own it?" James settled back against a tree, his long legs stretched out in front of him. "I came to Kansas 6 years ago with nothing but a horse and a bedroll. I worked as a ranch hand for a few years, saving every penny I could. When I had enough, I bought a small parcel of land near Garden City and started building. The first year was hard. I lived in a tent and worked from dawn to dusk every day. But slowly, I built a cabin, then a barn, then a bunkhouse. I bought my first cattle with money I earned breaking horses. The herd has grown every year since then." "You built it all yourself?" Clara asked, impressed. With help from friends and hired hands, James clarified. But yes, it is my land, my work. Everything I have earned through sweat and determination. That must make you very proud, Lily said. It does, James admitted. But it has also been lonely. A ranch is meant to be shared, to be passed down to children and grandchildren. I have been building something, but there has been no one to build it for, if that makes sense. Clara understood exactly what he meant. She had spent the last 8 months working herself to exhaustion to care for Lily, but there had been no joy in it, no sense that she was building toward anything better. They had just been surviving, day by day, with no hope for the future. Now, suddenly, they had hope. They had possibility. They reached Garden City late in the afternoon. It was a smaller town than Dodge City, with a single main street lined with modest buildings. James stopped at the general store to pick up a few additional supplies and to introduce Clara and Lily to some of the townspeople. Everyone seemed to know him, and they greeted him with genuine warmth and respect. "James, you old dog," the store owner, a man named Thomas Brennan, said with a grin. "Heard you went to Dodge City on business. Did not realize you were shopping for a bride." "Clara is going to be my wife," James said, his hand coming to rest gently on Clara's back. "And this is her sister, Lily. They are going to be living at the ranch." "Welcome to Garden City, ladies," Thomas said warmly. "We are always happy to have new faces in town, especially pretty ones." They also stopped at the church, where James introduced them to Reverend Matthews, a kindly older man with white hair and twinkling blue eyes. "Can you perform a wedding tomorrow?" James asked him. "I know it is short notice, but I would like to make this official as soon as possible." "Of course," Reverend Matthews said, beaming at Clara. "It will be my pleasure. Shall we say 10 o'clock? That will give me time to round up a couple of witnesses." Clara felt her stomach flip. Tomorrow. She was getting married tomorrow. It was all happening so fast, but she pushed down her nerves. This was what she had agreed to. This was the choice she had made for herself and for Lily. They left Garden City as the sun was setting, and James pointed ahead to where a cluster of buildings was visible in the distance. "That is home," he said simply. As they drew closer, Clara could see the ranch more clearly. There was a sturdy cabin built of logs, larger than she had expected, with a front porch and real glass windows. Behind it was a barn, a corral with several horses, and a smaller building that must be the bunkhouse James had mentioned. The whole property was surrounded by open prairie, with the evening sky stretching overhead in a vast dome of deepening blue. 2 men emerged from the bunkhouse as the wagon approached. They were both young, probably in their early 20s, and they greeted James with obvious respect and affection. "This is Pete and Sam," James said, introducing them. "They are my ranch hands. Pete, Sam, this is Clara Bennett, who is going to become my wife tomorrow, and this is her sister, Lily, who will be living with us." Both men snatched off their hats and nodded respectfully. "Pleased to meet you, ma'am," Pete said. He was the taller of the two, with red hair and freckles. "Welcome to the Thornton Ranch." "We will make sure the horses are settled," Sam added. He was darker, with black hair and a quiet manner. "You folks probably want to get inside and rest." James helped Clara and Lily down from the wagon, then led them up onto the porch of the cabin. He pushed open the door and gestured for them to enter. Clara stepped inside and caught her breath. The cabin was beautiful. It was one large room with a kitchen area on one side and a living area on the other. There was a fireplace built of river stone, comfortable furniture, and rugs on the wooden floor. A ladder led up to a sleeping loft above, and there were 2 doors on the back wall that probably led to additional rooms. "I know it is not fancy," James said, sounding nervous for the first time, "but it is solid and warm, and there is plenty of room for all of us." "It is wonderful," Clara said honestly. Compared to the cramped, dusty room they had been living in above the general store, this place was like a palace. James showed them around. One of the back rooms was his bedroom, which would become their shared room after the wedding. The other was a guest room that he had clearly been using for storage. "This will be your room, Lily," James said. "I will move the boxes out tonight and set up a proper bed for you." Lily looked around the room with shining eyes. "My own room?" she whispered. "I have never had my own room before." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. In that moment, she knew she had made the right decision. Whatever happened between her and James, whatever their marriage became, it was worth it to see that expression of pure joy on her sister's face. That evening, James prepared a simple dinner of beans, bacon, and cornbread. they ate together at the kitchen table, and Clara found herself enjoying the easy conversation. James asked Lily about her interests and was genuinely attentive when she talked about her love of reading. He promised to take her to the lending library in Garden City whenever she wanted. After dinner, Clara helped James clear up, while Lily sat by the fireplace with a book James had lent her. It felt strange and wonderful to be doing such domestic tasks in her own home. Or what would soon be her home. As she washed the dishes, James dried them, working beside her in comfortable silence. "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" James asked quietly. Clara considered the question. "Yes," she admitted, "but not in a bad way, more like excited and nervous mixed together." "I feel the same," James said. He set down the plate he had been drying and turned to face her. "Clara, I want you to know that I have been thinking about what happens after we are married. I meant what I said about not forcing myself on you. We can take things as slowly as you need." Clara felt warmth spread through her chest at his consideration. "Thank you for saying that. I think I need time to adjust to all of this. It has all happened so quickly." "We have all the time in the world," James assured her. "I am a patient man." That night, Clara and Lily shared the guest room, which James had cleaned out and furnished with a comfortable bed. As they lay in the darkness, Lily reached for Clara's hand. "Are you happy?" Lily whispered. "I think I am," Clara said, surprised to realize it was true. "I think we are going to be happy here." The next morning, Clara woke early and found that James had already ridden into town. He returned an hour later with a package wrapped in brown paper, which he handed to Clara with a shy smile. "I thought you might want something special to wear today," he said. Clara unwrapped the package and found a beautiful dress inside, made of cream-colored cotton with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. It was simple, but elegant, exactly the kind of dress a bride should wear. There were also new shoes and a pair of white gloves. "James, this is too much," Clara protested, even as she held the dress up against herself. "Nothing is too much for my bride," James said firmly. "Please, wear it today. I want this to be a day you remember fondly." Clara changed into the dress with Lily's help, and when she looked at herself in the small mirror James had in his room, she barely recognized the woman staring back at her. She looked healthy and respectable, not like a worn-out saloon girl, but like a woman who had value and dignity. They rode into Garden City together, all three of them dressed in their best clothes. The church was a simple white building with a steeple, and Reverend Matthews was waiting inside with his wife and Thomas Brennan from the general store, who had agreed to serve as witnesses. The ceremony was short and simple. Clara and James stood before the altar, and Reverend Matthews read from the Bible about love and commitment. When it came time for the vows, James's voice was steady and sure. "I, James Thornton, take you, Clara Bennett, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to honor you, to care for you, and to stand by you through whatever life brings us. This I vow before God and these witnesses." Clara's voice trembled slightly as she repeated the words. "I, Clara Bennett, take you, James Thornton, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to honor you, to support you, and to be your partner in building a life together. This I vow before God and these witnesses." James produced 2 simple gold bands, which they exchanged. When Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife, James leaned down and kissed Clara gently on the lips. It was her first kiss, and though it was chaste and brief, Clara felt it all the way down to her toes. When they pulled apart, James was smiling, and Clara found herself smiling back. "Ladies and gentlemen," Reverend Matthews announced, "I present to you Mr. and Mrs. James Thornton." There was a small celebration at the general store afterward. Thomas and his wife had put together a cake, and several of the townspeople stopped by to offer their congratulations. Everyone was warm and welcoming, treating Clara like she truly belonged there and not like she was an outsider or someone to be looked down upon. It was a heady feeling after so many months of being treated as less than human. When they finally returned to the ranch in the late afternoon, Clara felt exhausted but happy. She was married. She was Mrs. James Thornton now, with a home and a husband and a future. It seemed impossible that just 3 days ago she had been serving drinks in the Silver Dollar Saloon, trapped in a situation that seemed hopeless. James helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering on her waist for just a moment longer than necessary. "Welcome home, Mrs. Thornton," he said softly. "Thank you, Mr. Thornton," Clara replied, then laughed. "This is going to take some getting used to." "We have time," James reminded her. "We have all the time in the world." That evening, after a simple supper, Lily retired to her room early, claiming to be tired from all the excitement. Clara suspected her sister was trying to give her and James some privacy on their wedding night. Once they were alone, James poured them each a small glass of whiskey. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass. "To new beginnings," Clara echoed, clinking her glass against his. They sat together on the porch as the sun set, watching the prairie turn from gold to purple in the fading light. Clara was acutely aware of James beside her, of his presence and the fact that they were now husband and wife. She was nervous about what might happen when they went inside, but she also found herself curious. James had been nothing but kind and patient with her. Perhaps sharing a bed with him would not be the frightening ordeal she had imagined. "Clara," James said quietly, breaking into her thoughts, "I want you to know that tonight we do not have to do anything you are not comfortable with. I will sleep in the loft if you want the bed to yourself." Clara turned to look at him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. He truly meant it. He was giving her complete control over the pace of their physical relationship. It was such a gift, such a show of respect, that she felt something shift inside her chest. "I think we can share the bed," she heard herself say. "We are married after all, and I trust you, James." His face lit up with such genuine happiness that Clara felt her heart skip a beat. "I am glad you trust me," he said. "I promise I will do everything I can to be worthy of that trust." When they finally went inside and prepared for bed, Clara changed into a nightgown in the privacy of the bedroom, while James gave her space. When she emerged, she found him already lying on one side of the large bed, leaving plenty of room for her. He was shirtless, and Clara could not help but notice the lean muscles of his chest and arms, evidence of years of hard physical labor. She climbed into bed beside him, her heart pounding. James reached over and took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "Good night, Clara," he said softly. "Thank you for becoming my wife." "Good night, James," Clara whispered back. "Thank you for saving us." She expected to lie awake for hours, too nervous to sleep, but the bed was comfortable, the room was dark and quiet, and James's presence beside her was reassuring rather than threatening. Before she knew it, she had drifted off to sleep, her hand still clasped in his. The next few weeks passed in a blur of adjustment and discovery. Clara threw herself into learning how to run the ranch household, determined to prove that James had made a good choice in marrying her. She learned to cook on the wood stove, to manage the accounts, and to preserve food for the coming winter. Lily's health improved dramatically in the clean prairie air, and she spent her days exploring the ranch and helping with lighter chores. James was patient and encouraging, never criticizing when Clara made mistakes, but always ready to show her a better way to do things. He worked long hours managing the ranch, but he always made time to eat meals with his new family and to sit with Clara on the porch in the evenings, talking about their days. As the days passed, Clara found herself growing more and more comfortable with James. She liked his dry sense of humor, his quiet strength, and the way he listened when she spoke as though her thoughts and opinions truly mattered to him. She caught herself watching him sometimes when he did not know she was looking, admiring the way he moved, the sound of his laugh, the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her. One evening, about a month after their wedding, James came in from working in the barn to find Clara baking bread. He walked up behind her and put his hands on her waist, pulling her back against his chest. Clara stiffened for just a moment, then relaxed into his embrace. "You are getting flour all over yourself," she said, but there was no real complaint in her voice. "I do not care," James murmured into her hair. "Clara, I have been patient, but I need you to know that I am falling in love with you. If you do not feel the same way, I will understand." But I could not keep it to myself any longer. Clara turned in his arms so she could see his face. His gray eyes were vulnerable, uncertain in a way she had never seen before. This strong, confident man was nervous about her answer, and that realization made her brave. "I am falling in love with you too," she admitted. "I have been fighting it because it seemed impossible to fall in love so quickly, but I cannot deny it anymore. When you are near, I feel safe and happy. When you are away, I miss you. That is love, is it not?" James's response was to kiss her, and this kiss was nothing like the chaste peck they had shared at their wedding. This kiss was deep and passionate, full of all the longing that had been building between them over the past weeks. Clara responded instinctively, her arms wrapping around his neck, her body pressing against his. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, James rested his forehead against hers. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly. "We can wait if you need more time." "I am ready," Clara said, and she meant it. She wanted this, wanted him, wanted to fully become his wife in every sense of the word. That night, they made love for the first time, and it was nothing like what Clara had feared. James was gentle and patient, taking his time to make sure she was comfortable and enjoying herself. There were moments of awkwardness as they learned each other's bodies, but there was also laughter and tenderness and a growing sense of rightness. When it was over, Clara lay in James's arms, feeling more content and complete than she had ever felt in her life. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," James whispered back, his arms tightening around her. "Thank you for taking a chance on me, Clara. Thank you for making my house into a home." As summer gave way to fall, the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. Clara had fully taken over management of the household, and she discovered she had a talent for making the ranch run smoothly. She kept the accounts, managed the supplies, and cooked meals that had Pete and Sam declaring her the best thing that had ever happened to the Thornton Ranch. Lily continued to thrive in the clean air, and the doctor in Garden City declared her lungs much improved. James and Clara grew closer with each passing day. They worked together during the day and made love at night, and Clara found herself wondering how she had ever lived without this man. He was her partner, her best friend, and the love of her life. When she thought back to those dark days in Dodge City, working at the Silver Dollar Saloon with no hope for the future, it seemed like a lifetime ago. One October evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Clara realized she had missed her monthly bleeding. She had been so busy with the harvest preparations that she had not even noticed until now. Her hand went instinctively to her stomach, and she felt a flutter of excitement mixed with nervousness. "James," she said quietly, "I think I might be with child." He turned to look at her, his eyes wide. "Are you sure?" "Not completely certain, but fairly sure," Clara said. "I have missed my courses, and I have been feeling sick in the mornings lately." James let out a whoop of joy and pulled her into his arms, spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing. "We are going to have a baby," he said, his voice full of wonder. "Clara, we are going to be parents." "Are you happy?" Clara asked, though the answer was written all over his face. "Happy does not even begin to describe it," James said, setting her down gently and placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "You have given me everything I ever wanted, Clara. A wife, a family, a future. I love you so much." "I love you too," Clara said, tears of happiness streaming down her face. "I never thought I could be this happy. I never thought any of this was possible." The next months passed in a flurry of preparation. James and the ranch hands built a cradle and additional furniture for the baby. Lily was overjoyed at the prospect of becoming an aunt, and started sewing tiny clothes with help from the ladies in Garden City. The whole community embraced Clara's pregnancy, with the women offering advice and support, and Clara felt truly part of something for the first time in years. The baby came in June of 1879, after a long but manageable labor. James stayed by Clara's side the whole time, holding her hand and wiping her brow. When the baby finally arrived, a healthy, wailing boy with a shock of dark hair, Clara felt her heart expand in a way she had not known was possible. "A son," James said, his voice thick with emotion as he held the tiny bundle. "We have a son, Clara." They named him Thomas, after James's father, who had passed away when James was young. Little Thomas was a good baby, healthy and strong, and he quickly became the center of their world. James was a devoted father, often taking the baby with him to do chores, carrying him in a sling against his chest while he worked. Lily blossomed in her role as aunt, and at 17, she had grown into a beautiful young woman with a sharp mind and a kind heart. She helped Clara with the baby in the household, and she had started teaching reading to some of the ranch children in the area. The weak, sickly girl from Dodge City was gone, replaced by someone confident and healthy. One evening, about a year after Thomas's birth, Clara and James sat on the porch watching their son toddle around the yard under Lily's watchful eye. James had his arm around Clara's shoulders, and she leaned into him contentedly. "Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if I had not walked into that saloon?" James asked. "All the time," Clara admitted. I think about where Lily and I would be now if you had not offered to help us. Probably still trapped in debt to Vernon Pike, or worse. I think about it too, James said. I think about how close I came to not going to Dodge City at all. I almost sent one of the ranch hands to sell the cattle instead. If I had, we never would have met. But you did go, Clara said, turning to look up at him. And you did meet me, and you chose to help us. That took courage and kindness, James. Not every man would have done what you did. I got the better end of the deal, James insisted. I was looking for a wife, and I found the love of my life. I found a woman who is strong and smart and beautiful, who makes me laugh and challenges me to be better. I found a family. That is worth more than any amount of money. Clara kissed him, slow and sweet, tasting the truth of his words. They had both taken a leap of faith that day in Dodge City, and it had paid off beyond their wildest dreams. What had started as a practical arrangement had become a true love story, the kind that would last a lifetime. Over the next few years, the Thornton family continued to grow and thrive. Clara gave birth to 2 more children, a daughter named Rose in 1881 and another son named Daniel in 1883. The ranch prospered under James's management and Clara's careful household oversight, becoming one of the most successful operations in the area. They expanded the house, adding more rooms and a second story to accommodate their growing family. Lily met a young lawyer named William Carter when she was 19. He had moved to Garden City from St. Louis and was immediately taken with the intelligent, well-read young woman who helped run the Thornton Ranch. James and Clara gave their blessing, and Lily married William in the spring of 1882. They built a house in Garden City, and William became one of the town's most respected citizens. Lily remained close to her sister, visiting the ranch often with her own children as the years passed. Pete and Sam remained loyal employees of the ranch, eventually building their own small cabins on the property and starting families of their own. The Thornton Ranch became more than just a business. It became a community, a place where people looked out for each other and worked together toward common goals. As the years passed and their children grew, Clara and James's love only deepened. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, dealt with cattle thieves and economic downturns, but through it all, they had each other. James never took Clara for granted, always treating her with the same respect and tenderness he had shown her from the beginning. And Clara never forgot how lucky she was to have found a man who saw her worth when she had been at her lowest point. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1888, James took Clara on a trip back to Dodge City. The Silver Dollar Saloon had closed down years earlier after Vernon Pike was arrested for fraud and illegal debt practices. The building stood empty now, its windows boarded up, a relic of a darker time. Clara stood in front of the abandoned saloon, holding James's hand, and thought about the young woman she had been a decade ago. That Clara had been desperate and scared, working herself to exhaustion with no hope for the future. She had been trapped, with no way out, and no one to help her. But then a stranger had walked through those swinging doors and changed everything. "Thank you," Clara said, turning to James, "for seeing me when I was invisible to everyone else, for taking a chance on me, for loving me." "Thank you for saying yes," James replied, pulling her close. "For trusting me, for building this life with me. I would do it all again in a heartbeat, Clara. You are the best decision I ever made." They kissed there on the dusty street in front of the old saloon, and then they walked away hand in hand, leaving the past behind them and heading toward their future. By the time they reached their 15th anniversary, the Thornton Ranch had become one of the most prominent in western Kansas. Their oldest son, Thomas, was now a young man of 14, with his father's height and his mother's sharp mind. He was already helping run the ranch, learning the business from James, with plans to take over someday. Rose, at 12, was a bright and spirited girl who loved horses and could ride better than most of the ranch hands. Daniel, at 10, was the quiet one, preferring books to physical labor, but with a head for numbers that made him invaluable in managing the ranch accounts. Clara looked at her family gathered around the dinner table one evening and felt a wave of gratitude so strong it brought tears to her eyes. This was the life she had been meant to have. These were the people she was meant to love. And it had all started with a gunshot in a saloon and a cowboy brave enough to offer help to a stranger. "What are you thinking about?" James asked that night as they prepared for bed. Even after all these years, they still talked every night, sharing their thoughts and dreams the way they had from the beginning. "I am thinking about how grateful I am," Clara said, For you, for our children, for this life we have built together. I am thinking about the girl I was in that saloon and the woman I have become, and how none of it would have been possible without you." James crossed the room and took her in his arms. At 43, he was still strong and handsome, though his hair was now more gray than dark. "You would have found a way," he said confidently. "You are the strongest person I know, Clara. You survived that terrible situation, kept your sister safe, and never gave up hope. I just gave you an opportunity. You did all the hard work of becoming who you were meant to be." "We did it together," Clara corrected. "That is what marriage is it not? Two people helping each other become the best versions of themselves?" "I suppose it is," James agreed, smiling. "And I could not have asked for a better partner." They made love that night with the easy familiarity of long-married couples who still desired each other deeply. Afterward, lying in the darkness with James's arms around her, Clara thought about how far they had come from that first awkward night as virtual strangers. Now they knew each other's bodies and hearts as well as they knew their own. They had created a life together, a family, a legacy. The years continued to pass in a blur of seasons and celebrations. Thomas married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring spread, bringing a sweet young woman named Sarah into the family. Rose shocked everyone by announcing she wanted to become a veterinarian, one of the first women in the region to pursue such a profession. James and Clara supported her ambitions, helping her find a mentor in Garden City, and eventually sending her to school in Kansas City. Daniel became a teacher, opening a small school on the ranch property, where he taught not only his younger siblings and the ranch workers' children, but also children from nearby homesteads. Lily and William had 4 children of their own, and the cousins grew up together, spending summers at the ranch and creating memories that would last a lifetime. The house was always full of noise and laughter, exactly as James and Clara had dreamed it would be. On a warm summer evening in 1898, James and Clara celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary. Their children and grandchildren, Lily and her family, Pete and Sam and their families, and what seemed like half the town of Garden City gathered at the ranch for a party. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, and speeches that made both James and Clara cry happy tears. As the sun set and the party wound down, James took Clara's hand and led her away from the crowd, out to the spot where they had stood so many evenings watching the sunset. They were both in their 40s now, their hair showing gray, their faces lined with years of laughter and hard work. But when James looked at Clara, he still saw the beautiful woman who had walked into his life 20 years ago and made everything better. 20 years, Clara said softly. It has gone so fast. And yet, I can still remember every detail of the day we met, James said. The way you looked when you came to my table in that saloon, trying to be brave when you were terrified. The way your face lit up when I offered to help. The first time you smiled at me and meant it. I remember thinking you were too good to be true, Clara admitted. I kept waiting for you to show your true colors, to reveal some terrible flaw or expectation. But you never did. You were exactly what you appeared to be, a good man looking for a partner. We were both taking a gamble, James pointed out. I married a woman I barely knew. You married a stranger and moved to an isolated ranch in the middle of nowhere. Either one of us could have been making a terrible mistake. But we were not, Clara said, squeezing his hand. It was the best decision either of us ever made. Do you have any regrets? James asked. Anything you wish had been different? Clara thought about the question seriously. I regret the circumstances that brought us together, she said finally. I wish my parents had not died, wish Lily and I had not been in such desperate straits. But I do not regret meeting you, marrying you, or any part of the life we have built together. You saved us, James, but more than that, you loved us. You gave us a home and a future. How could I regret any of that? I feel the same, James said. I am sorry you had to suffer it all, but I am grateful it brought you to me. Does that make me selfish? It makes you human, Clara said with a smile. We all want to believe that our pain has purpose, that the hard times lead to something better. And, in our case, they did. As they stood there watching the last light fade from the sky, surrounded by the sounds of their families celebrating nearby, Clara reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from a saloon in Dodge City to this successful ranch, from desperate strangers to devoted partners, from a marriage of convenience to a love story for the ages. She thought about the scared young woman she had been, working every night at the Silver Dollar Saloon, watching her debt grow while her sister's health declined, with no hope and no way out. She thought about the moment when James Thornton had walked through those swinging doors and changed everything. She thought about the courage it had taken to accept his proposal, to trust a stranger with her life and Lily's future. And she thought about everything that had come after. The early days of their marriage when they were still learning each other, the first time they had made love, the birth of their children, the building of their ranch and their family. All of it had been worth the risk, worth the leap of faith. "Thank you," Clara said again, as she had said so many times over the years, "for everything." "Thank you for saying yes," James replied, as he always did. "For being my wife, my partner, my love, for making my life complete." They kissed there in the twilight, their grown children and grandchildren giving them privacy, and Clara knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be, in the arms of the man who had saved her and then spent 20 years proving that love, real love, was worth waiting for. The years continued their steady march forward. The new century arrived, bringing with it changes and challenges. Automobiles began appearing on the roads, replacing horses and wagons. Telephones made communication easier. The Wild West of Clara's youth gave way to a more settled, civilized era. But through it all, the Thornton Ranch remained a constant, a place of stability and family. Thomas and Sarah gave James and Clara their first grandchildren, twin boys who inherited their grandfather's love of ranching. Rose graduated from veterinary school and returned to Garden City, opening a practice that served the entire county. Daniel's school grew, eventually becoming a proper schoolhouse that educated hundreds of children over the years. Lily's children grew up and started families of their own, and suddenly James and Clara found themselves surrounded by grandchildren and great-grandchildren. On their 30th anniversary, the family gathered once again at the ranch for a celebration. James was now 57, his hair completely gray, but his body still strong from years of ranch work. Clara was 52, her face lined but beautiful, her eyes still bright with intelligence and humor. They had weathered 3 decades together, faced every challenge as a team, and their love had only grown stronger with time. 30 years, James marveled as they danced together under the stars, their children and grandchildren watching fondly. "When I married you, I hoped we would have a good partnership. I never imagined we would have this, all of this." "Neither did I," Clara admitted. "I was just hoping to survive, to give Lily a chance at a better life. I never dreamed I would find love, have children, build an empire." "We built it together," James reminded her. "Every success, every achievement, we did it as partners." "We did," Clara agreed, resting her head on his shoulder as they swayed to the music. "And I would do it all again, exactly the same way." As the years passed into the 1910s, James and Clara gradually stepped back from the day-to-day management of the ranch, turning more and more responsibility over to Thomas and his sons. They still lived in the ranch house, still participated in family gatherings and important decisions, but they finally had time to simply enjoy each other's company. They took trips together, visiting Rose in Garden City, Daniel at his school, and Lily and her ever-growing family. They spent long afternoons on the porch, holding hands and watching the prairie grass wave in the wind. They attended church socials and town events, pillars of the community who had earned respect and admiration through decades of hard work and fair dealing. On a warm evening in June of 1918, 40 years after they had first met in the Silver Dollar Saloon, James and Clara sat together on their porch as the sun set. James was now 66, Clara 62. They had weathered illnesses and economic downturns, family drama, and personal challenges. But through it all, they had remained devoted to each other, their love, the foundation upon which everything else was built. 40 years, Clara said softly. "Almost half a century as your wife." "The best 40 years of my life," James said, bringing her hand to his lips and kissing it gently. "Every single day with you has been a gift, Clara." "Even the hard days?" Clara asked with a smile. "Especially the hard days," James said, "because those were the days when we really proved what we had, when we showed that our partnership could withstand anything. I loved you on our wedding day, but I love you even more now, after 40 years of learning who you truly are." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. Even after all this time, James could still make her cry with his words. "I love you too," she said, more than I ever thought possible. You took a desperate saloon girl and her sick sister and gave us a life beyond our wildest dreams. How can I ever thank you enough for that?" "You already have," James said, "by being the best wife, the best mother, the best partner anyone could ask for, by loving me as much as I love you. That is all the thanks I need." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red. Clara thought about the journey that had brought them here, from that desperate night in Dodge City to this peaceful evening surrounded by family and prosperity. She thought about all the moments in between, the fear and uncertainty of their early days, the joy of falling in love, the pain and wonder of childbirth, the pride of watching their children grow into good people, the sweetness of grandchildren and great-grandchildren. "Do you ever wonder what happened to Vernon Pike?" James asked suddenly. Clara was surprised by the question. They rarely spoke of that time, of the circumstances that had brought them together. "I heard years ago that he died in prison," she said. "After he was arrested for fraud, they discovered he had been running similar schemes in several towns. He hurt a lot of people before they finally stopped him." "Good," James said with feeling. "He was a bad man who preyed on desperate people. I am glad he faced justice." "So am I," Clara said. "Though in a way, I suppose I should be grateful to him. If he had not been such a terrible person, I might never have been desperate enough to accept your proposal. We might never have married." "Fate works in mysterious ways," James said philosophically. "But I prefer to think we would have found each other eventually, no matter what. Some things are just meant to be." Clara leaned into her husband, breathing in the familiar scent of him, feeling the steady beating of his heart. "I like that idea," she said, "that we were always meant to find each other, one way or another." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, James and Clara went inside to join their family for dinner. The house was full of children and grandchildren, laughter and love. This was the legacy they had built together, not just a successful ranch, but a family that would carry on for generations. The years continued their inevitable march. James and Clara grew older, their steps slower, but their love undiminished. They celebrated their 50th anniversary in 1928, surrounded by children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and friends from across the county. It was a grand celebration, with people coming from as far as Kansas City to honor the couple who had become legendary in the region for their love story and their contributions to the community. 50 years, James said during his speech at the party, his voice still strong despite his 77 years. 50 years married to the woman who saved my life by agreeing to share it with me. Clara, you are my heart, my soul, my everything. Every good thing in my life traces back to the day I walked into that saloon and saw you. Thank you for taking a chance on a lonely rancher. Thank you for giving me a family. Thank you for 50 years of love and partnership." Clara stood beside him, tears streaming down her face, too moved to speak. But she did not need words. Their love was evident in every look they exchanged, every touch, every moment they had shared over the past 5 decades. As the 1920s gave way to the 1930s, age finally began to slow James and Clara down. They spent most of their time at home now, content to sit on their porch and watch the world go by. Their family took care of them, the same way James and Clara had taken care of others for so many years. It was fitting, Clara thought, that the love they had given was being returned to them now. On a crisp autumn evening in 1935, Clara sat on the porch wrapped in a quilt, watching the sunset. James had been ill recently, a bad cold that had settled in his chest and refused to leave. The doctor had been by earlier and had spoken quietly with Thomas, using words like pneumonia and his age that made Clara's heart clench with fear. But James was resting comfortably now, and Clara took advantage of the peace to sit outside and think. She was 80 years old now, though she hardly believed it. How had so much time passed? It seemed like just yesterday she had been a young woman working in a saloon, desperate and hopeless. And yet, here she was, an old woman with a lifetime of memories and a family that stretched across generations. The door behind her opened, and she turned to see James emerging, wrapped in a heavy robe. "What are you doing out of bed?" she scolded gently. "I woke up and you were not there," James said, his voice hoarse but determined. "I wanted to watch the sunset with you, like we always do." Clara made room for him beside her. and James sat down with a small grunt of effort. She tucked her quilt around both of them, and they sat close together, sharing warmth and comfort the way they had for more than 50 years. "It is a beautiful sunset," James said after a while, his breathing labored but his voice content. "It is," Clara agreed, though she could barely see it through her tears. She knew with a certainty that terrified her that their time together was running out. James was ill in a way that old age and modern medicine might not be able to fix. "Clara," James said softly, taking her hand in his, "I need you to know that I have no regrets. My life with you has been everything I ever wanted and more. You made me the happiest man alive." "Do not talk like that," Clara said, her voice breaking. "You are going to get better. We are going to have more years together." "Perhaps," James said. "But if we do not, I want you to know how grateful I am for every day, every moment, every memory we made together. You were the love of my life, Clara Thornton. You always will be." "And you were mine," Clara whispered, holding tight to his hand. "From the moment you offered to help me in that saloon, you have been my hero, my love, my everything." They sat together in silence as the sun disappeared below the horizon, painting the sky in its final burst of glory before giving way to night. Clara held James's hand and prayed for more time, more years, more sunsets together. But she also felt grateful for what they had already shared, for the incredible journey they had taken from desperate strangers to devoted partners. James recovered from that illness, though he was never quite as strong afterward. He and Clara had another 2 years together, 2 precious years filled with quiet moments and family gatherings. And then, on a peaceful morning in May of 1937, James passed away in his sleep with Clara holding his hand. He was 86 years old and had lived a full, rich life. Clara mourned him deeply, missing him with an ache that never fully went away. But she also celebrated the life they had shared, the love they had built, and the family they had created. She lived for another 5 years, surrounded by children and grandchildren who loved her deeply. She spent her days telling stories about James, about the ranch, about the wild times in Dodge City that seemed like ancient history now. When Clara passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1942 at the age of 86, the family buried her next to James in the small cemetery on the ranch property. Their headstones stood side by side, just as they had stood side by side through life. The Thornton Ranch continued to thrive, passed down through generations who never forgot the story of how it all began. The tale of the saloon girl and the cowboy who saved her became family legend, told and retold to children and grandchildren. It was a reminder that love could bloom in the most unlikely places, that kindness and courage could change lives, and that sometimes taking a chance on a stranger was the best decision you could ever make. James and Clara's legacy lived on in their descendants, in the ranch they had built, and in the love story that had started with a simple offer of help in a Dodge City saloon and had blossomed into a lifetime of devotion. They had proven that real love, the kind that lasts, was built not just on passion, but on respect, partnership, and unwavering commitment to each other. Their story became the gold standard for the family, the example that later generations looked to when building their own relationships. And if you had asked either James or Clara in those golden years when they sat together on their porch watching the sunset, whether they would change anything about their journey, they would have said no. Every hardship, every challenge, every moment of uncertainty had been worth it for the life they built together. They had found each other in the darkness and had created a light that would shine through generations. That was the true magic of their story. Not that a cowboy had saved a saloon girl, though he had. Not that a marriage of convenience had become a love match, though it had. But that 2 people, thrown together by circumstance and desperation, had chosen every day to love each other, to support each other, and to build something lasting and beautiful together. That was the real miracle, and it was a miracle that their family would carry forward for generations to come.